It's time for Tech Tuesday. This is when we talk about the latest gadgets and gizmos, and we talk about whether you should spend money on it. Of course, this is something that spans a variety of different topics. We've spoken about earphones, we've spoken about mobile phones, we've spoken about a variety of gadgets. But today, we're going to speak about a smartphone which is trying to break the mold. And we talk about how they're trying to do that and whether this is the natural evolution of the smartphone or if it's just something to grab your attention. Dhruv Bhutani, the editor of Android Authority, is joining me to talk about nothing. Uh, Actually, he's here to talk about the Nothing phone. Dhruv, thank you so much for joining in. Could you tell us why this stands out? One would assume that it has to do with the bright lights that are associated with this phone.
Yeah, I think nothing is certainly hoping to shine bright in the smartphone landscape. But it's a twofold approach. On one hand, you don't really see that many new smartphone brands enter the market, and also there's the impact of the people behind it, primarily being Kalpay, who's pretty well known for being one of the co-founders of OnePlus. And by all means, it certainly appears that they're trying to replicate the success, or Carl is trying to replicate the success that he had with OnePlus. And there's a certain similarity to the formula that's being applied here. The focus on design, for example, and a lot of hype around the phone. So obviously the expectations are also pretty high. And so far, what we've seen definitely looks quite interesting to me.
Let's get into some of the nitty gritties of it, though. And I'm sure that a few of our viewers have seen some of the visuals out. And of course, pre booking, as I understand it, Dhruv, starts this week. The phone gets launched next week.
Right.
What can you tell us about the design elements that make this phone stand out?
Right. So, a short while back, the company introduced its first product, which was the Nothing Ear One, a pair of true wireless earphones. And they had a certain design element to it, which is that basically the entire design was more or less transparent. And Nothing is trying to replicate that with the phone. You can't really do that with the front or the sides of the phone. So you have a transparent back. But it's not just a transparent back. It's also about how aesthetically the elements, the components of the phone are laid out. And they're introducing this something that they call the glyph system, which is basically just a series of lights laid out quite aesthetically at the back of the phone. And these lights are used not just for notifications, but they'll also react to the ringtones, which is quite similar to what we used to see on some of the Nokia phones, back in the 2000s. And it some might call it a gimmick, but it is something interesting and something fresh in the smartphone design space. One of the things that really stood out to me is that they've got a progress bar, a set of LEDs placed next to the USB connector. So if you wiggle the phone, it's going to show you the progress of charging the phone, which is again, something pretty cool to see. So overall, like Nothing is basically just pushing the design frontier, and I think that's a fair approach to take because design really is the last frontier where you can truly differentiate your phone. The specifications are pretty much the same across the board. Most smartphone brands are picking up from the same parts bin to make their smartphones. So there's not much that they can do over there. So I like the approach that Nothing is taking here for sure.
Just have some visuals that we've taken from the Nothing handle. And it does look like an interesting prospect, right? But let's talk about some of these aspects. The glyph, as you pointed out, is something that a lot of people will look at, and this is what sets the phone apart. So, a few things to
Right.
unpack over here. One, let's talk about the phone itself first. The fact is, I think, Dhruv, when you spend a few thousand rupees, so you talk about this phone. First of all, where is it expected to be priced? Do you have some idea as to where it's expected to be priced?
I would expect. I'm assuming this is going to be a mid-range phone, and it
Okay.
should ideally be priced between 30 to 35,000, though there's no official confirmation on that yet.
Okay, assuming that you're right and it's priced, I would think pretty attractively at 30 to 35,000
Hmm.
rupees for a brand new phone that is trying to break the mold. A lot of people using smartphones would say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to put a cover on it. So, what's the use of the lights? Is that something that will prove to be a challenge?
Well, I'm hoping that the company has a transparent cover to go with it.
Okay, so that would cover
But
that aspect. Yeah.
right, but at the end of the day, Alex, I mean, um, a couple of years ago, it was all about performance and gaming, but today, practically every phone is good for gaming. So it's certainly refreshing to see, and I can totally see that this is going to be a very polarizing design. I don't see my parents carrying a phone like this, but somebody who wants to make a bit of a statement, and is buying a phone as a design with design and aesthetics in mind. Something like this could certainly be an interesting choice, don't you think?
I think so as well. And I think, we've had conversations about design in the past as well when people have tried to have the foldable phones coming back with the single screen, right? And you're trying to break the mold, and bringing something new to the table is so difficult when you have smartphones that have
Yeah.
evolved so much already. Do you think this is enough to say that the smartphone is evolving, or do you think it's too early to say that?
I would say that, I mean, the smartphone certainly is evolving, but in its evolution, we're seeing much slower upgrades. And that's not a bad place to be in. The fact that, at the end of the day, even a mid-range phone, somebody who just doesn't want to spend more than 15 to 20,000 rupees on a phone can still get some phenomenal specifications. Phones have become a commodity. So it is nice to see, while foldables are still, ultra premium devices. But even in the mid range, this is pretty much what you're going to see in terms of evolution and personalization, customization, those kind of elements. Because overall, it's not as if you're going to see performance changes, drastic performance changes. Even in terms of imaging, there's only that much that you can improve on. Sure, photography will get better, but it's not as if it's bad right now. It's already really good. So it's all about incremental changes from here on.
Okay, let's talk about Nothing then as a provider of hardware. What do we
Mhm.
know in terms of what they've had already? You've pointed out that they had earbuds. They
Right.
will be manufacturing this here in India.
I believe they are manufacturing in India, and they've had quite a bit of success with the earphones as well. And that brings me back to the entire master of marketing bit about Kalpay, where the man surely knows how to get a community going. And that community effect, I think they'll recently reveal some numbers. The earphones, the true wireless earphones, have sold about 600,000 units, which is a fantastic number for a fresh upstart.
Uh, let's talk about after sales then, because this is something that I think a
Mhm.
lot of people will focus on, considering that this is a new entrant. And that's the reason
Right.
why I asked about it being manufactured here in India. You said that
Mhm.
parts may not be a concern, but if you're talking about LEDs, you're talking about a fair bit of intricacy in the design of this phone. Is that going to be a
Mhm.
challenge? Do you think that network will be an issue for Nothing initially here in India?
Mm, Um, so I obviously don't, I mean, we don't, nobody knows yet because there's been no official confirmation on it, but it appears that the company is partnering with Reliance because that's what the rumors suggest for offline retail. And, if they've got those offline channels sorted, I'm assuming they would have taken care of after sales and support as well. But as far as the LEDs go, no, that's not going to have any impact on, the longevity of the phone or even the repairability of the phone. Quality SMD LEDs, the kind that they're probably using, they have long lifespans. If you look at something like the Philips Hue, those LEDs are rated for 20,000 hours of constant use. And this is not going to get constant use. It's either just going to be used for notifications, or even if you use the key light feature, which is again something pretty unique, with everybody taking videos these days. There is a ring of lights at the back of the phone, which essentially like acts like a ring light, uh, and that's pretty innovative. But even if you use that a fair bit, it's those LEDs are going to last longer than the lifetime of the phone itself. You'll be ready to upgrade your phone by then.
Of course, it's too early to perhaps talk about this because you haven't had a chance to look at the phone yourself and test it yourself. But
Mhm.
what about people who say that, look, you're putting lights on the body of the phone, on the external part of the phone, will that not drain battery? LEDs don't consume that much, right?
No, they don't. I mean, it's a very minimal battery consumption, and unless you have the LEDs going at full blast, full brightness all day long, you might notice an hour less of battery life. That's about it. But nobody's going to be doing that. That's not the intended use case. So no, I mean, it's not going to have any measurable impact on battery life.
The OS and talk about the chipset then. And
Mhm.
what are the comparisons that you can draw to peers that are currently in the market in terms of performance?
Mhm. So nothing hasn't really revealed the performance bits or the chipset yet. Uh, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was a thoroughly mid-range phone, with something like a Snapdragon 7 series chipset. Simply because for a startup, and especially with the ongoing semiconductor shortage, it's going to be really hard for them to land, the high-end chipsets. Um, and even from a pricing point of view, it just makes sense to hit the mid-range segment where the mass market is, where the bulk of the purchases lie. If they came out of the bat with a 70,000 rupee phone, they're just not going to be able to cater to the community that they've spent so much effort building towards. So I would expect this to be a proper mid-range phone with I mean, yeah, with the Snapdragon 7 series chipset. But again, we'll just have to wait and watch.
So here's the other question. You mentioned that this will be a polarizing design, and that's clear to see
Mhm.
right from the onset. Again, I don't think that my parents will be out looking for this phone.
Yeah.
But, it does have the lure of something new and something glittery or shiny. Uh, what does it pit itself against then? It's in that mid-market segment with a reasonably
Mhm.
powerful chipset, we're assuming. So does it contend with players that are higher? Does it go up against the OnePluses?
I think, I mean, if you just compare it on a spec sheet level or from a price point of view, it would most likely be taking on the OnePlus Nord series, as well as phones like the Poco F4, and some more from Xiaomi and Realme. But I don't think that's the market that they're going off after right now. So they listed the first 100 phones on StockX, the marketplace where sneakerheads go to, or the fashion first audience. It's clear that from that design centric view, they're targeting the hype beast, the younger audience, people who want to stand out, people who want to buy something a little different. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're not particularly targeting any specific brand in terms of their messaging. This phone will just have to stand out on its own merits, and that's mostly just going to be around the design. I don't see anybody who's very spec focused being too keen on this device. At least not for that reason.
That's a fair point entirely, but I think I'm reminded of the phones back in, as you pointed out, the early 2000s, where you saw all those flashing
Mhm.
lights and they were so interesting to look at. Let's see if other people think the same as well. Thank you so much, Dhruv, for
Right.
joining in and for taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks.